Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Power BI. I am Isma. I work as the Pro Bono OR Manager at the OR Society. I'm delighted to be co-hosting with Ruth, who is the chair of the Pro Bono Steering Group.
Thanks very much, Isma, and I'm delighted to be here and see all of you. If you can, if you do get a moment to put your camera on so that we can all glimpse and say hello, that would be great. And if you can put your affiliation in your name, that would also be nice, but you don't have to. If you can introduce yourself in the chat, that would be brilliant. I am somebody who's been on the board of and chair of and volunteer for a number of charities, and I spent my working life doing operational research and other management roles in the public sector. So for those of you who don't know, operational research, OR, is using maths, IT, science, and a little bit of common sense to help organizations manage themselves more effectively and more efficiently. It's widely used in the public sector and in the private sector. And over 10 years ago, the Operational Research Society, the Society for OR People, which is itself a charity, set up a pro bono scheme in order to help people who work, OR people who work in the public, private sectors and in academia, to offer their skills for free as volunteers for charities. And what we're going to see in a moment is the fruits of one of those projects, because we thought it was something that would be more interesting, more widely. So Isma, that's my basic introduction, and back to you.
Before we start, just a quick note on the format. So you can ask your questions in the chat as well during the session, and the relevant person will try and answer. If not, we'll have a 10-minute question answer session towards the end of the webinar, so you can also ask your questions then. So today we're joined by three fantastic speakers, Sujit, Annalise, and Ian, each bringing their unique insights to the webinar. I'd like to invite each of you to briefly introduce yourselves. Sujit, let's start with you.
Sure, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Sujit, and I am a digital data and technology professional in the civil services. I also volunteer at the Operational Research Society on projects where I can help charities with their management information systems and reporting needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujit. Annalise, would you go ahead?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Annalise. I am from Off Defence Trust, which is a charity based in Brighton and Hove. We're a poverty tackling charity. And my role within the organisation is Trust Foundations and Executive Support Lead. It's a bit of a mouthful, but basically means that I help with fundraising and then help with the executive suite.
Thank you, Annalise. Ian.
I'm Ian. I'm the founder of Charity Excellence. We're the largest and fastest growing charity community. I'm supposed to talk about how I used to do chief exec and chair and stuff, and I've got a master's degree and all that, but fundamentally we find money for little charities, and I'm the mad old bloke with the bunny rabbits. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Without further ado, let's get started. I will hand it over to Sujit first, who will be talking about data visualization and how it has established itself not only as a powerful working modality, but also expanding the realm of operational research, especially in packages like Power BI. Over to you, Sujit.
Sure. Thank you, Isma. So I'll start by sharing my screen. Give me a few minutes, please. So so this is our topic, and we're starting with introductions in here. And so I thought so we'll start with the fact that today we're celebrating the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. So it perhaps is befitting to reflect upon how modern operational research has evolved from supporting the early radar detection systems in World War II to now, where it plays more of a central role in decision support systems across sectors. We see it being employed in various sectors, starting from transportation, healthcare, telecommunications, and now even beyond. Given the current strides in the development of personal computing, of microcomputing, and even quantum computing. In the not so distant future, we're probably going to have quantum computers as prevalent as personal computers today. Given the access to cloud-based, sophisticated, open source, and even licensed data storage, data management, data processing, data visualization software and algorithms, one could say that business intelligence that you see there, one of the circles that you see there, is now no longer the domain of IT code geeks. In fact, one could argue that business analytics has actually been democratized. And one of the tools that's leading this effort in democratizing business analytics is Power BI. So through the two case studies that we have lined up for today, we would explore how off-the-fence trust and charity excellence have leveraged Power BI to facilitate impact assessment and maximize effectiveness. So we'll probably start off with off the fence. I'll probably hand it over to you, Annalise. If you'd like, I can continue sharing my screen, or I'll stop and have you share the screen.
Sure, feel free to continue sharing because it's just a few slides that I'm going to be sharing from. So we'll start with challenge number 1. So we off the fence engaged with OR's pro bono scheme, I think it was last summer. And I'll set the scene as to where we were as a charity in terms of data recording and data visualization, and how that presented a challenge in the sense of reporting. So we have 3 distinctive programs as an organization, which tackle different elements of the poverty cycle. We have our Anti-Free Centre, which addresses homelessness in Brighton and Hove through a drop-in centre as well as night outreach. We have a Women's Centre, which addresses women in crises. So that could be from housing to relational issues to financial crises. And then we have our schools and youth program, which works with schools in the local area through one-to-one mentoring, PSHE classes, and transition facilitation. So between year 6 and year 7, that transition period. So those 3 programs are very unique, very distinctive, which creates a unique problem in the sense of creating a systemized reporting process, if you will, that is the same for all 3 programs, regardless of their unique qualities. So the first challenge was KPI identification, and we worked together to identify what are some key KPIs that our teams could be reporting on, that basically hit on the same nails in the sense of our one-to-one delivery, group activity delivery, and any physical item distribution. So that could be sleeping bags, meals, bottles of water, hot chocolates, depending on depending on what the program is. So I think, yeah, it was the first kind of bit of time we did a project brief as to, okay, what do we want? How do we want to go about it? And so we also looked at our communication outlets. That's more my area. I oversee the social media for Off Events as well as Trust Foundations. And they're all very closely interlinked. I'm sure if anyone's in fundraising in this space, you'll know that comms and fundraising work very closely together. So that's a nice joining. So it's also creating KPIs for communications to make sure we can track growth in those areas as well. Another big thing with having such unique programs is having a language that's universal through all 3. So what is language that everyone will understand, easy to translate, definitions wise, so then everyone knows what they're reporting, why they're reporting it, and also agreeing monthly timeframes. So how do we want to track that data reporting? Is it over a year? Is it over a month? Over a week? And we found 12 months incentive once a month would be able to identify growth, identify areas of need, as well as being in line with our reporting timelines. So some programs were reporting calendar year, some were reporting academic year, some were reporting financial year prior. And so we brought them all together to be financial year, as that is in line with our accounts. Just to make sure everything works in the same process. So yeah, so we worked in that first little bit of time. Okay, what are our KPIs? How do we want to be reporting them? Will it be easy to use? And yes, and then we progressed. Once we had that all kind of put together, we progressed to the next challenge, which was the KPI visualization. A big thing, because we have such a diverse range of computer skills within our teams, and we are a Microsoft-based organization, so all of our work is based on Teams. We wanted to make sure that the interface that was being used for data reporting was easy access. It wouldn't be this very complicated digital space that someone who maybe isn't as confident with computer skills might find inaccessible. So we landed on Excel as being the reporting template. As all of our teams have used Excel, it's well known, and the way it was constructed is a very visually appealing reporting form. That's basically you'll see in a second, what is the activity that was carried out, how many times was that carried out. And so we worked together. I mean, I say we, you guys. They put together the Power BI connecting with Excel. And because of the use of a cloud-based space, they talentedly connected both the Excel and the Power BI within that team space to make sure that it would be automatically updated as the teams reported, so then we could see on the reports how that was affecting the numbers. And that created some unique challenges unto itself to make sure that synchronization between the report forms and the report itself was carried through, and there weren't any glitches in that system. So we did a few troubleshooting tasks to make sure that ran smoothly. But we got there in the end, which was amazing. And since that has been put together, it's been a real game changer for Off the Fence. We now have a very clear process for all of our program managers on reporting monthly, both on output numbers as well as on outcome indicators, which is quite key within the charity sphere. Is it's all fantastic doing things, but actually what is the impact of those things? So some key kind of outcome indicators was individuals housed. So, okay, yes, we are distributing sleeping bags. Yes, we're distributing meals, but also because of the support we're giving, we're seeing people housed. So that was a key outcome indicator that we were able to start reporting on through this process. And it was this last month or so between April and May, we started doing our end of financial year reporting based on these indicators. So this is from 23-24. So we recently did from 24-25. Sorry, Sujith, if you could just go back to that last, I'm just going to go back to those growth indicators. So through the data visualization, we were able to benchmark growth, which is so key. So we saw a 38% rise in the number of women accessing Gateway Monthly. We saw a 35% increase in number of students engaging in mentoring sessions, and 120% increase in antifreeze faith-based session attendance. We are a Christian organization, so that was quite key in our reporting. But it was wonderful to see those growth statistics, and that was all based on a very clear reporting system that was internal. And as a result, even with fundraising, that was a game changer, because it meant that we had a very clear process. Okay, what are our output stats? What can I report back to funders? Without needing to bug them on a daily basis, because I started to become that person asking for numbers, asking for quotes, asking for statistics. And it just meant that there was this very clear kind of process and system that I was able to source to carry out those interim reports. And then, yeah, we'll go into the examples as to what they look like. So this is an example of one of the Excel forms. And this is for our antifreeze center. So, I mean, from this, you can see kind of our key activities that we carry out within the center. You've got your immediate need distribution, as well as some of the sessions that we run. and some of those outcome indicators. So we're moving into that space of what is our long-term impact as an organization. And so, yes, as you can see, it's very visually appealing, which I think is always so nice. So it's not just a whole of numbers, but it's actually very clear as to what you're reporting on. And then that translated into the Power BI interface and the reports. So again, this is for schools and youth. And for the last financial year, in April. So, yeah, so as you can see, again, brilliantly visually appealing. It really shows that growth or decline or areas of need within our services. And what this meant, so by having these reports, it meant accountability within higher management and with the stakeholders. So it meant that we, at a touch of a button, we were able to download a PDF, attach it to an email, and send it to our board of trustees, send it to our executive office. And just meant there was, if your feet weren't on the ground, if you're not in the programs, you still get a snapshot as to what's happening on a daily basis. And so it's really increased the efficiency within our programs. Means managers are needing to spend lots of time analyzing their internal data. But even at that year snapshot says of what's occurred over the year, it doesn't take a whole day's worth of work. It just means that we can download these reports. And it saves so much time. And anyone in the charity sphere, you know that time's a luxury, in the sense that everyone's very busy, wearing many hats, and so it just means that this isn't a burden in terms of time. So, and yes, this is Gateway, so slightly different. But again, shows those key activities that are carried out, as well as comparisons. So, what was also very interesting, and it was helpful to assess this with the different programs, is where are seasonal spikes in demand for things. So we found even over Christmas, there was a real spike, or that festive season, in one-to-ones being needed. And then through more qualitative assessments, we found out that was for financial need, which kind of makes sense in the sense if you're struggling with financial poverty, the need for that one-to-one support to assess how am I going to do my budget, how am I going to meet the needs of Christmas. We're kind of able to plan, okay, when might those spikes be needed? What additional support might we need to prepare for those seasonal peaks? But yes, so it very much is helpful for database planning and database decisions. And we were so blessed to be able to receive this consultancy pro bono. So we're very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you, Annalise, for walking us through the transition to an integrated reporting framework, if you will, where your management could report and assess the impact of your flagship programs. So let me walk you through the through the next piece. That is, how was this transformation enabled? Now, my fellow operation research volunteer, Bonson Tho, he actually deserves a lion's share of the credit for this one. Together, he and I, over a course of 14 to 16 odd weeks, we had a discussion with the off the fence team, Annalise and her leadership included, where we reviewed the existing impact assessment reports, just like what Annalise had mentioned earlier. This was for us to gain an understanding of the key performance indicators of each of their flagship programs. What we then did was we then assessed the data that's been collected by the respective field teams, and which they upload to their organization's OneDrive. We assessed that data for the format, for the usage restrictions, etc., to have an understanding of what kind of data architecture would suit the reporting requirements. Once we had this understanding, we developed a Power BI desktop file. Now, that Power BI desktop file does a couple of things. That's what's illustrated in the block diagram. It consolidates the various spreadsheets that the field teams upload into the OneDrive. It consolidates all of them. It then analyzes the data, applies the required data transformations to generate the visuals that Annalise had shown earlier, had spoken through, had walked us through earlier. In the presentation, I've also provided a link to the case study. Pro Bono has a link to this case study in the website. So for further details on this case study, please refer to the link in this presentation. So let's now explore how charity excellence leverages data analytics to generate insights from its big data. In fact, those insights are shared widely with the charity sector. It's a project that was amongst the finalists shortlisted by Charity Times in 2024. Very interesting project. Shall I hand it over to you, Ian?
Sorry, could you close, Annalise? I can't share.
Okay, all right. So I will stop sharing.
Perfect. Right. I'm Ian from Charity Excellence. The problem is Annalise is young, talented, and a very good presenter, and she just explained that. I'm none of those. So I'm kind of stuck to follow that one. However, I'm going to do two things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you just how powerful this thing is. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how OR Society is making this available to everyone, even the little guys. And when you're going, well, what's the point of all this data? I will show you a final slide and I will tell you what is likely to happen to fundraising in the next 6 months, which is of interest to all of us. This is the master control panel. Bottom right is an AI bunny rabbit. If you're wondering why he's wearing cool sunglasses, it's because he's a cool bunny. He not only uses machine learning, he also uses generative GPT, and he also has vectorized data systems. This is the master control panel. This is the charity sector in real time. It tells me all about it. I've got governance. I look at strategy communications. The critical health check in the bottom left tells us about risk in year, risk long term, whether people are maximizing impact. And this is what I used for the cost of living crisis. And I extracted resilience data. I created a model. I predicted the path of the crisis for the charity sector. We got it absolutely bang on. It took me forever. I can't see longitudinal. And that is a problem. So I've got all this data, but how do I get more out of it? So we've got data on every aspect of charity activity, everything. From 2018, I've got the cost of living crisis. I've got the COVID crisis. So we can model futures. We can do all of that. There are over 500 statements in the system, all of which have data. And we use that to predict. So when you log in and you do your setup page, it takes you 2 minutes. There are about 50 different criteria. There are about 100 running in the background that you can't see. You can dice and slice this by 150 different ways. We've used that to create models around diversity, well-being, fundraising, resilience, and we're heading towards 1 million data points, and it's getting bigger every day. I can't exploit that. I've got that little dashboard, and it's like, how can I get this? It's got everything we want. Everybody talks, we really need data, and I've got the data, but how do I get it? And this is what Suja's built. There are 9 interactive dashboards. Every single one of them's got multiple components. Every single one of those components can be diced and sliced. So all those little graphs in the top middle, that's things like fundraising, it's looking at governance, it's looking at all these different things, and we can say to it, could you give me this for Scotland or England, or could you give me this for these income bands? Could you give me this for hospices? Whatever you like, or any mix of that. And every time you just click the option, it will filter and it will recalculate all of them. 9 interactive dashboards. And what that allows me to do is basically to jump into the data. And I can run through it and I can click this and I can play with that. And I'm looking for the anomalies and the things that jump out. So every single element can be analyzed using multiple criteria. And it massively increased our ability to both extract and analyze that data, and a significant reduction in workload. Me crunching my way through endless bloody spreadsheets, creating statistical models of the future progress of the cost of living crisis. It took hours. I'd tell you all about it, but it's really dull. I can now just click on the dashboard and it gives me a graph, does it all for me. Those visual representations allow you to spot things, and I'll show you how that works. And it's really simple to use. If you want charities under 10K, you just click charities under 10K and it's done. It's a standard enterprise software, so anyone else can pick it up and use it. And because it's Microsoft and not my original personal bespoke design, it's future-proofed. We don't need to update the data anymore. Like, how much does that stuff cost? Well, actually, it doesn't really cost anything. If you wanted to pay for the kind of skills that Sujith brought, yeah, that would be like seriously expensive. The OR Society did it pro bono. It didn't cost us anything. What about your ongoing running costs? It's Microsoft. They do non-profit discounts and they got a $2,000 grant. So actually you get it for nothing. There aren't any financial costs associated with this. And for us, thanks to Sujith going beyond his original specification, we're looking at our admin processes, our re-engagement. The Microsoft AI isn't good enough for what we want yet, but once they upgrade it, we will be able to use it to populate things like our Finder directories, etc. So it's not just about crunching data. The damn thing can do an awful lot more than that. That's how powerful this is. And you go, yeah, so what does that mean for me? This is what it means. Yeah, it's a graph. If you look at COVID, you can see fundraising resilience. You can see it tank. It recovered. It took 7 months. This is August 22. What this data tells us is that fundraising resilience was falling long before the cost of living crisis, and that the charity sector went into crisis in 2022. It didn't go into crisis in 2023 when the cost of living crisis was there. And you can see us recovering as you get towards the middle of the graph. This time it took 7 months. And then our analysis of the government funding cuts told us they'd taken $1 billion out. And you can see what that did. It absolutely tanked fundraising. That fragile recovery, we were nearly there by the middle of 2023. The government funding cuts wrecked the fundraising recovery completely. How long did it take to recover this time? 11 months. 7 months, 8 months, 11 months. Can you see what the data is telling us? And if you look at this for January 25, we're back more or less recovered. If you go back to mid-2023, what I'm seeing is exactly the same economic conditions. We've got difficult economic situation. We've got the tariffs. We've got war in the Ukraine. God forbid, Pakistan and India. We've got Gaza. We've got all of that going on. All those global headwinds are out there. We are looking at the June statement, the likelihood of substantial public sector funding cuts. It's just the same as it was in mid-2023. Does that mean fundraising is going to tank? No, we don't know. But there are serious, serious risks very clearly. And if it tanks, based on what we're seeing from the data, it will take more than a year to recover this time. This is giving us information that enables us to prepare. It is giving us information the government doesn't have. It can give us very, very effective campaigning tools. That's how powerful it is. What the OR Society did is they made this possible. We could not have done this without Sujas and the OR Society. And this level of technology that Annalise and I are both benefiting from, anyone can access it, and it doesn't cost you anything. This is what the future looks like. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. We have a question by Sylvia in the chat, but I think it's a great question. So, Ian, I mean that you're better positioned than I am to answer the source data that the question is. Would you like to answer that?
Yes, Charity Excellence, you log in, you do your My Profile. What the system actually does is creates a three-dimensional digital model of your charity. So you get a set of questionnaires that are built around you. And as you score the questionnaires, all the data is sucked into the master controls. And then all of that data is aggregated, pushed through the algorithms and the modeling, and then comes out in the Power BI as much simpler and understandable. Everything is anonymized. So when you enter your data will not be shared with anyone else. We're not like Facebook.
Right. Hopefully that answers your question, Sylvia. So I'd like to share a few further details about this project. Let me start sharing my screen again. All right. So hopefully that's up on the screen. Yeah, I can see it on the screen. All right. So again, thank you, Ian. So from what Ian said, we have seen how Charity Excellence leverages Power BI for near real-time analysis, and then uses that to make predictions. And we've seen how Charity Excellence does that without the need for large-scale investments in either people or technology. So how is the existing infrastructure leveraged to generate these kind of predictive insights? Now, I've shared a link to the case study, and I see it's shared in the chat as well. So that should give a few details into what was done to get to this particular stage. The block diagram that I have shared in the slide in here, I use that to illustrate the fact that Microsoft Power Platform is in fact a suite of services. Now, when we built the prototype, and I had showed Ian a few of the things that could be done using all the suite of services. So, which is why in the block diagram for the prototype that I built, and I had a model-driven application and a chatbot, which was used to scale the questionnaires, if you will. But when we went live, we have not used all of these services. We've used just the Power BI service that you see in here, which is where you get all the dashboards. All the other services that you see in here, they are available to be used, but then of course we need to license each of these services. The case study is actually an example of how a suite of new generation technologies are available for the third sector to exploit without the need for any significant upfront costs. The approach that was taken, I'm hoping this would come up on the screen. So that's the link to the case study. Oh, there you go. Right, let me share that. So further details about the approach taken, all of those are listed in here, and the services used, all of those are listed in here. Feel free to pursue this. Happy to take any questions when you have the chance to go through this later. So let me start with some of the other applications of Power BI. So So we talked through through these examples. We saw how Power BI could be used for standard reporting applications, just like the build impact assessment reports, or for predictive applications. In fact, a lot more that we can use Power BI for, which falls in the realm of operational research. I mean, so we have explored the art and the science of visualization. How that can be used to improve our individual as well as our collective ability to make use of that information. So these are aspects of operational research, which I would say it's an ongoing developing field within operation research, an emerging realm. We also saw how Power BI could be used to build these visualizations without in a what I would call in a low code mode. If you were to build such visualization, such analysis using an open source stack, it's not going to be as easily done as Power BI enables us at the moment. Having said that, is Power BI the only data visualization tool that's available? Certainly not. I mean, there are quite a few other tools in the market. However, I'd like to reference the report by Gartner. I'm going to share that in the screen in here. This is Gartner's 2024 Magic Quadrant report. It shows a comparative study of the data visualization tools in the market, and there you go. So you see that Microsoft's the suite of services for business analytics is actually a leader. It's a leader in this particular space, which is why perhaps Microsoft Power BI has the interest in Microsoft Power BI has seen a dramatic increase over the last few years. So what I would like to conclude with is a few links to a few references by Microsoft, and so these are links to the grants and offers by Microsoft on its entire product suite, which is available, which is especially customized for the nonprofit sector. Please take your time, or when you have the time, please review these links if you're interested. I know Ian has gone through this process, but there is a particular process that you would need to go through to apply for the nonprofit sector license, which means you get, I think it's close to an 80% reduction from the commercial rates on Power BI. That brings us to the end of the structured presentation that we have, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thanks a lot, Sujit, Ian, and Annalise. So let's open up the floor for questions. If you have a question, you can pop it in the chat as well, or raise your hand if you'd like to speak directly.
Shall I kick off with a question? And I would encourage the audience to ask questions, because that's really the point of coming to a live thing like this, instead of just reading about it afterwards. So it'd be great if you do have questions which you can put directly. But can I start by asking Annalise about how difficult it was to trust your existing data and hand it over and work with somebody from outside on that process?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely put in some safeguards. Obviously, the individuals we work with are in very difficult circumstances. So we approach data and on that side very sensitively. So we made sure, in terms of access to data, that both Sujit and Bonson had very finite access. In a sense, it was just to the quantitative data. There wasn't any client data. There wasn't any personal data that was accessed in that way. So in that way, trust was a lot easier because it's quantifiable data, not qualitative. And so, yeah, we had a few discussions in the sense of how we would work around confidentiality, around use of data, deletion of data. But it just put everyone at ease in the sense of, yeah, that trust with data. Hope that answers your question.
Well, there's also the bit about the quality of the data.
Oh, the quality,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, so because we've spoken about the integration of CRMs into the data to kind of eliminate any human error, if you will. But we actually landed on manual input. In that way, it was because our teams were already reporting in that way, in a manual way, instead of a uploading of data. We trusted the quality of data because it was the kind of process we had already. And then yeah, seeing the visualization of the data, it then made sense that we could do the maths manually, and that made sense. So in that way, the quality wasn't up for question in the sense we trusted it fully.
That's great, thank you. I can see we've now got 2 questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to actually unmute yourself, Kelda, and ask the first question about moving from another BI platform, or if not,
Well,
Sujit, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I'm happy to answer that question. Great question, Kelda. So in terms of, so just to give the context, so they obviously are various Power BI tools in the market. Organizations are at different stages of maturity in terms of in terms of business intelligence. So what if an organization wants to move from one business intelligence platform to another? In this case, Power BI. The short answer to the question is it's not difficult. Now, the long answer to the question would be it depends a lot on how the data is structured. So let me expand on that a bit. There are data connectors that are available in Power BI to source data from from close to about 500 different data sources. So these are standard data connectors. Any Power BI developer, when he or she builds a tool, would be knowledgeable enough to use those data connectors and extract the data from any of these data sources. If those don't suffice, then the person has to be slightly more technical enough to write an API and build an API data connector. So that's one piece. That's in terms of sourcing the data from the various data sources. Second, all business intelligence tools, there's a standard protocol that's followed in terms of exporting the data. So data that you have in one business intelligence platform can be exported in either in XML format or CSV format, etc. There are utility tools that Microsoft provides to import the data in bulk. So when data from another platform is exported in a standard CSV format or an XML format, we could use the appropriate data configuration tools to import the data into Power BI. Now, having said that, there needs to be a good understanding of how to map the data from one data source to another data source, which a trained Power BI specialist should be able to do. I know it's been a long-winded answer. So the answer is technically it is possible. It's something that any Power BI specialist should be trained to do. In terms of time frames, etc., how easy, it all depends on how the data is currently structured. It's relatively easier to move from one structured data to another structured database. If you want to move the data from in an unstructured to a structured, I mean, that tends to be a little more complex. But people who are trained in data science should be able to find a workaround on that. Hope that answers.
Well, that leads us I mean, I suppose there is also the question of what is it that you want to move? What's the reason for wanting to move, which you'd want to go into a bit. But just moving on from your last comment, it leads us right into the next question from Lily Adams, which is, I think, a really important question for many charities, is how organized must data be before signing up to this? So, yeah.
Thank you. I'm happy to take that question.
We all have guilty secrets, I think, about our data and the way we keep it.
Well, I think that's a question that most of us would have in our minds, especially when we want to move data across platforms. Now, again, the easiest thing would be to move from one structured data format to another structured into Power BI, because obviously the data is relational, so you're able to map the data from one source to another source. So a data science professional would look at it from different stages. So when you get the data, you need to clean the data. So in this process of cleaning the data, you would follow certain principles where you ensure it follows a specified format, etc. So now, if, let's say, for example, your data does not exist in Excel sheets, perhaps, let's say, the data is in PDFs, right? Possible. Then the challenge is far greater, because then what we need to do is we need to use the right tools to convert that PDF data format to a relational or a columnar data format, so that Power BI can build the visualization. So it's a little more complex there. But if your data exists in Excel, in CSV format, then it's far more simpler. Just like what we saw in the case of OTF, Off the Fence. I mean, their data existed in CSV formats, in Excel formats. So it was relatively easier to get all the data, to source the data from various spreadsheets, apply the various Power Query transformations. So I hope that gives a little bit of insight into that question, Lily.
And can I just add to that I think all of our volunteers are different and have a different philosophy, but in general, the philosophy is that we start from where the client is. So, if what you've got is a few collections of handwritten notes about what somebody thought were the right answers, and each slightly different from your different your different members of staff or volunteers, that's what you've got to start with. And the fact that somebody like Sujit has got sort of amazing skills to do the technical stuff doesn't mean he doesn't also have hand-holding skills to say, take the first baby steps. So it's starting from wherever you are and helping through. Is I think I'd just kind of add to that, but yeah, it will depend on who you're working with. And the next question, all these questions are coming for Sujit, so I'm going to open this one out a bit. There's a question which said for Sujit, how much time did you spend on these projects? But I think I'd like to start first with Annalisa and Ian to give Sujit a bit of a break. So how much time did you spend sort of making time to be grilled by Sujit, to comment on what he was producing, to say maybe, no, that's not quite what I had in mind, can we go that way, whatever. So Annalisa, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. I mean, our context was probably a little bit unique in the sense of project timeline. We had some project management changes in the sense of who was overseeing the project, which caused a bit of a lag, which is on our end. So it probably took a lot longer than it maybe could have. But once the project was kind of in full force, trying to think, it was about half an hour's call a week to kind of touch base, see how the project's doing. That was on a weekly level, so it wasn't days a week. It was about an hour a week, and then we also, I think what's also pretty helpful to kind of note, if anyone's kind of concerned about their kind of tech skills or computer ability skills in terms of time, is through that 1 hour call, we also, by using Teams, we're able to give them control and sense of actually doing things on Power BI on our behalf. So if they're suggesting, can you click that button? You're like, I can't see that button. You're able to give that access. So that also reduced the time. So instead of you wasting time trying to problem solve on your end for something you really don't know anything about, through those 1 hour calls, we were able to use that time effectively. So yeah, it's quite a low commitment time wise on the beneficiaries side, which is deeply appreciated.
Thanks. Did you also have to sell it to anybody else in the organization?
To be fair, we had quite unanimous buy-in, which was wonderful. Everyone in terms of upper management was wanting that kind of regular accountability and reporting. So and on our lower management level, everyone was kind of getting sick and tired of those regular messages asking for numbers. So I think having a very clear system through Power BI was very welcomed, actually. So yeah, I was very grateful for that.
Thank you. Ian, same question.
Yeah,
How
I
much
mean,
of your time?
we spent hours, but to be honest, the vast bulk of the workload of the project was done by Sujith. Sujith's work was far, far higher than ours. So our actual contribution to what we've got was fairly limited. Could I tack back to the thing about how structured does your data have to be? With the arrival of AI and data lakes, etc., this kind of thing is going to have to be standard. And making sure that your data works in Power BI, I just see that as part of the process. And I think the point I would make is if your data doesn't work in Power BI, it doesn't work in an Excel spreadsheet either. So actually going through the process with Sujith, we didn't find any problems, but what it did is it validated our data structure. And I've actually seen on my personal experience a number of charities running data and making decisions and extracting data and coming to conclusions that when you actually look at it from a data statistics point of view, it was just bloody wrong. So there's another benefit.
Thank you. And that is hugely important because the data, there's not really much point in data for data's sake. It's there to inform what you do, isn't it? But that leads us back, sorry, in terms of time, Sujit. And when you answer how long you spent on it, there were two things, I think. I'm vaguely aware with Ian anyway, that there was the first request and then there was the bit that said, oh, if you can do this, can you also do that? So do you want to just give an indication to Jane's original question, how much time you spent?
Sure. So so on the two projects, now each of the project takes a life of its own, if you will. So on Annalise's project, I mean, so that's a project that when the requirements were well defined and the scope was smaller, if you will. So so over there, so what happens is from a volunteer perspective, it is unlike our day job, right? It's in a day job, we would probably have stricter project plans, and we would say, all right, get this done. These are your sprints. Get this done in a sprint. That's not how it works, and we're not expected to work that way in a volunteering setup, isn't it? So fortunately for me and for Bonson, Annalise and the leadership was willing to give us the time and the space. We kind of spaced it out, I think, over a period of 3 to 4 months. We completed the dashboard, and in the span of 3 to 4 months, if my recollection, if my memory serves me right, we probably would have spent about 25 hours in total, but it was spaced out over a period of 3 to 4 months. On charity excellence, it took a life of its own, if you will, like what Ruth had mentioned. So the initial scope was to look at the data infrastructure, and then once we realized, all right, so there's so much we could do with the existing data, the scope got expanded a bit. So if my memory serves me right, overall that engagement went on for about a year, and but the scope expanded quite a bit, and Ian was very nice in terms of we having periodic discussions when each of us were available. Yeah, so I think that was a project that ran for about a year, and likewise, I mean, I don't recall having more than 4 hours of calls in a month through this period of 1 year that I engaged with Ian. But again, so there are spikes and there are troughs. That is at points of time where we need to have a workshopping kind of discussion. We had it online in a Microsoft Teams. And those kind of calls would have gone on maybe for an hour or so, and then they were quick 10-minute 15 20-minute chats where I just wanted to get his idea on how I'm moving with the prototype. So yes, so hopefully that answers your question.
And I see we have 2 minutes to go, which will probably be down to 1 minute by the time we've finished.
Can I say Sujit is being extremely modest here? And one of the things that really came out of the exercise is you go in thinking we can do A, B, and C. Once you lift the lid on Power BI, you suddenly realize that E, F, and G, this thing can do a lot more that you didn't understand until you actually unpack it.
Thanks, Ian. Sylvia has a question which would require a really quick answer, and I'm not sure we've got time actually, so maybe you can Sujit can drop your note afterwards. But it is really important point about suggestions for somebody who'd like to learn Power BI, which is also to do with skills transfer at the end of a project. So it's not just about relying on the analyst, it's passing it over. So given the time, I'm afraid I'm going to suggest that to finish on time, or me to hand back to Isma for the closing remarks. We'll speak to you outside that, but if anybody has any further questions, I'm sure that any one of our panelists would be delighted to answer them. But yes. For me, thank you very much to the audience and to the panelists, but Isma, your closing.
Thanks, Ruth. That brings us towards the end of today's session. A huge thank you to Sujit, Ian, and Annalise for taking out the time and doing this, and for everyone else for joining. I've sent in 2 links in the chat. One link will lead you to the Pro Bono OR program. You can explore that. And then there's another link that you can use to fill out a form. If you want to take this conversation further, I'd be more than happy to talk to any of you and maybe do a future Pro Bono OR project. Apart from that, we have another webinar coming up in September, so stay tuned for that, and I'm hoping to see all of you then. It's going to be on the use of AI for charities. Thanks again, and that's it. See you guys in September, hopefully.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.